Hello everyone and welcome back to Versus, the show that takes art and makes it slug it out in glorious battle. I'm your host Mark Ellis, and while some others may find it intimidating to take a bunch of beloved characters from popular franchises and toss them into a pit of competitive fury, not this guy. I could do this all day.
I understood that reference.
I won't, because I also have naps to take and a dog to walk, but the three heroes we have on the program, they have no problem fighting against villains, government regulations, even each other from time to time, because we have Iron Man against Captain America against Thor, also known as Tony Stark versus Steve Rogers versus Thor. Johnson? What's his? Just Thor, son of Odin.
You had one job.
In one corner, you have the billionaire playboy. But enough about me. Let's meet Tony Stark. Whiz kid turned weapons magnate turned superhero after a near-death experience in a cave. Stark became Iron Man and was not shy about letting the world know who he really was. Thor didn't really have an alter ego, mainly because that one ego, plenty big enough. He's the god of thunder who loves his homeworld of Asgard more than just about anything else, except possibly his sweetheart Jane, or the raccoon he refers to as a sweet rabbit.
Rabbit?
And then we have Steve Rogers, a scrappy, scrawny kid from Brooklyn who wanted to fight for his country and ended up being a thawed-out popsicle that helped save the entire universe from snappy destruction. Man, are we really doing this? This is gonna be fun. And the comment section? Oh boy. Do I get a suit of armor? I feel like I need one. Here's how we'll determine a winner. Round 1, box office. Round 2, Tomatometer / audience score. Round 3, iconic moments. Round 4, magazine subscriptions. And then we'll do a wild card round that somehow is even more secretive than round 4. It's a particularly exciting time to be talking about these MCU heroes past and present as we look to the future with sweaty anticipation for Thor, Love and Thunder. But as of this moment, each one of our fellows in competition today have exactly one trilogy to their name, as well as a bunch of little team-ups in film series called The Avengers. Black Widow got a cool spin-off movie, Hawkeye had a fun streaming show, and soon enough we'll get to see Hulk teach his cousin that it ain't easy being green. But today, it's all good old-fashioned OG MCU battles for all the marbles. Even if certain competitors may not be able to physically receive their trophies anymore. Let's get it on. Round 1, box office. Since the late 1960s, every so often we'd get a comic book movie hitting the big screen, and for the most part, audiences would get very excited. Batman was a hoot in 1966, Superman was a giant leap forward in 1978, and in 1989, Batman once again dominated the summer. X-Men and Spider-Man kicked off the new millennium with a bang, honorable mention to Blade as well. But then in 2008, the summer launched with a Jericho missile-sized event. Iron Man debuted that May, and by the end of that first weekend, he wasn't just a B character with an A theme song anymore. Much like when Black Sabbath hit the music scene, when the world saw Robert Downey Jr. as Tony Stark / Iron Man, the landscape of cinema was changed forever. Or at least until we reboot the whole thing. Iron Man 1 would go on to gross $585 million across the globe. Then Iron Man 2 would tack $621 million more onto the total. Iron Man 3 would then surpass the hallowed $1 billion line, notching a total of $1.2 billion. Oh, in between part 2 and 3, some talkie called The Avengers hit and earned a tidy $1.5 billion. It was a fun movie to be at. So Stark, for all of his movies that he's ever made an appearance in, has grossed $12.2 billion worldwide, but for our purposes today, let's focus on his trilogy. The numbers are still more than capable of buying a few American cheeseburger restaurants, $2.4 billion total, making for a per metal guy movie average of $807 million every time we hear AC/DC. Thor would be up next in chronological order, both in terms of movie release dates, and I think he's like 100 years older than Cap.
It's hilarious.
Anywho, April of 2011 saw the Asgardian hunk fall to Earth, gross $449 million, and alert us that, hey, we're building something pretty profitable here. Thor: The Dark World was next in his trilogy, and it would go on to earn $644 million. Then Thor: Ragnarok antlered its way to a Grandmaster-approved 850 million bones in Milky Way dollars. That gives T-Dog an almost $2 billion total, making for a per flick average of $648 million. We got us a ball game here. Yeah! Captain America showed up to battle the Nazis in the summer of 2011, and if you think he was a little late, the movie is a period piece. He wanted to serve his country in World War II. There was only one problem. He looked more like Squints from The Sandlot than a soldier.
Quiet!
But we showed up nevertheless and injected the box office with super serum to the tune of $370 million worldwide. Really? The lowest grossing kickoff of the three? Huh. Well, don't worry, pal. Once we got your Buckaroo Bucky into the sequel in a, more prominent role, that flick did $714 million, mainly on the strength of just how menacing Robert Redford can be towards housekeeping. Then Cap had a third movie, a little ditty called Civil War, and it earned a whopping $1.15 billion across the... I know what you're thinking. Hey Mark, you absolute stud. Didn't Iron Man really help out with that box office total? Yeah, he did. And so did Spider-Man and Black Panther and Ant-Boy. It was a huge party, but it was technically thrown by Captain America. Not only is that the best shindig a geriatric has ever tossed, but it also suddenly makes this round get a little squeezier. Cap's trilogy has hauled in a total of $2.23 billion, making for a per-movie average of $746 million. Iron Man was sitting on his throne, Thor knocked on the door, and Cap almost blew the house down. But even if we ignored the fact that Iron Man was heavily involved in the marketing for Civil War, Tony Stark still emerges as the all-time breadwinner amongst these three folks. He wins round one, but don't go getting cocky and challenging that arachnid kid from the Bronx. In a box office contest, it won't end well. But today, Iron Man gets on the board first and goes up 1-0 to nothing.
Wow, yeah!
Round 2, Tomatometer / audience score. Alright, so as impressive as those gaudy box office numbers may be, we've seen comic book films crush at the BO for generations. The real trick is having those sequels hold up to the original, not in terms of dollars and cents, but in critical reaction. Don't believe me? Well, first of all, that hurts my feelings. Secondly, remember how everyone loved Superman in 1978? Well, Superman 4, The Quest for Peace, rests at just 10% on the Tomatometer. Batman 1989 sure was beloved, but Batman and Robin, 12% on the TM.
Hi, Freeze. I'm Batman.
So this round, that's all about how critics and audiences felt about your product after they forked over the cash, will be won by which superhero can maintain the momentum from their first hit the most, or maybe even hit that nitrous boost for the sequels made popular by those fast and very angry movies. Let's kick off with your previous round's winner, Iron Man, who'd probably win a few street races with all that muscle in his garage. As for Tomatometer flexing, Tony's got that too. The first Iron Man flick is 94%, which ties it with Avengers Endgame. Iron Man 2 dropped down to 72%, and this is what happens. I warned y'all. Luckily, Iron Man 3 rebounded and found solid, fresh territory with a 79%.
Something magical is happening.
For Cap, it was a steady climb upwards, starting things off with a 79% for the first Avenger. From there, The Winter Soldier rose to 90%, and Civil War maintained the pace by tying it at 90%. That's an A- and can definitely get you into NYU, if your extracurriculars are up to par.
Does anyone have any orange slices?
So Cap sports an 86% average for his trilogy. Meanwhile, Tone Bear, can I call Mr. Stark that? Clings to an 81.6% average on the Tomatometer. The door is open, but is it wide enough for Thor to stroll through? The first Thor is fresh at 77%. The second Thor fell to 66%, and I told you it's happening again. Don't worry, Ragnarok turned it all around and notched to 92% on the Tomatometer. So every flick in every one of these trilogies is fresh, although Thor brings up the rear with a 78.3% average for his trifecta.
Ooh.
It's slightly better news on the audience score metric for the fella who doth wear mother's drapes, as he climbs to 79.3%, pinning him in a virtual deadlock with Iron Man, who averages 80% even with audiences. But we just seem to love that all-American 95-year-old the most.
Don't you say
He left.
Come on!
Cap's audience score average is a sterling 85%, on the strength of The Winter Soldier with its 93%. Meanwhile, the high audience bar for Iron Man is the OG at 91%, and Thor's best effort is with Ragnarok and it's 87%. So Captain America has the best averages for both Tomatometer and audience score, and he might have been able to pull off a win here without Civil War.
Come on, man.
But come on, that airplane tarmac sequence was pretty sick. I hate travel delays, but I'd miss my connection to watch that play out from a safe distance. Captain America gets the win in the Tomatometer / audience score round and gets his first point of the day.
Hey! Let's hear it for Captain America!
Round 3, iconic moments. If I had a nickel for every time one of these heroes did something cool, amazing, stupendous, or just said something braggadocious, I would cease to be Mark Ellis and would become Scrooge McDuck. Between them, these boys have 9 movies solely dedicated to showing off their heroic nature in the face of incredible odds, imposing villains, and let's be honest, you gotta do it before any of the other super beings beat you to the punch. But who has the most, best, all-time sweetest iconic moments? A premium will be placed on your solo film efforts, but I'll let a few Infinity Game kind of sequences slide in there as well.
Get this man a shield.
From the get-go, Tony Stark let us know exactly who he was, what he cared about, and how far his journey to becoming a beloved superhero would be. His introduction mirrors that of the Jericho missile itself. Like the explosion it creates, its manufacturer is bold, bombastic, and leaves one needing a drink immediately after witnessing it. The missile's cool. The fact that Stark brings a mobile booze cart to the proceedings is ingenious. Thor makes a grand entrance as well in the throne room during the early going of his very first film, but for me, it was the rain fight scene that really showed us the might of this brawny brawler. And for comedic relief like no earthling could possibly pull off, Thor marching into a pet store and demanding a horse is an all-timer.
I need a horse.
We don't have horses.
Steve Rogers' intro is more along the lines of, "That is Captain America? How many protein shakes do we have to watch this poor guy chug before that happens?"
Jesus. Somebody get that kid a sandwich.
But then the super serum kicks in, and immediately we realize that the scrappy kid is now capable of electrifying chase scenes. Okay, let me give that kid his shine though. I do applaud him for jumping on the Tommy Lee Jones grenade when everyone else ducked in fear. Thor continues kicking ass in the Dark World, particularly if you make your living as a rock monster. Meanwhile, in Iron Man 2, Tony goes from cock of the walk to scared chicken in the road when he's confronted with the ominous presence of whiplash while a world watches on in horror. See, that's a problem with being a big, famous superhero. Folks are going to see you at your best and your worst. But whereas the second entry for both Iron Man and Thor weren't their shiniest moments, the Winter Soldier was a bold step forward for both Captain America, now in modern times, and the MCU in terms of crafting a spy thriller disguised as a comic book flick. The elevator fight is the single best fracas of its kind since John McClane asked for the winning lottery numbers in Die Hard with a Vengeance, and it's nuts to witness the turn of Robert Redford. He went from guy who's BFFs with Sam Jackson's Nick Fury to literally the worst person in the world.
Hail Hydra.
Yet I still love when he hits the big home run in The Natural. It's also super weird to see my boy Gary Shandling whisper Hail Hydra. Hashtag not my Larry Sanders. Say we want about Iron Man 3 and its hilarious twist.
Hey, it's complicated,
It
right?
is.
It's complicated.
But the sheer amount of Iron folk we get in that movie is scintillating. But for me, it's the tender moments that make the film a winner. Tony opening up to Rhodey about his very real PTSD after the Battle of New York, and Iron Man bonding with a random kid who ends up growing on him. Civil War acts as a sort of Avenger film all by itself, but the headlining match is one I still can't believe I got to witness. Cap versus Iron Man. I still maintain that if that's just Tony versus Cap, Stark wins. But then, you got that pesky Winter Soldier that always show up to wreck a billionaire's day. Don't believe me? Just ask Tony's dad. Too soon?
Dick move.
Thor Ragnarok is by far the most highlight stacked of his 3 solo ventures, thanks in large green part to Hulk. The friend from work line ranks among the best in comic book movie history, and Thor and Loki also have so much to work out as they try to better their own situations in the process. If I was to give one honorary point for an Avengers movie, I'd love nothing more than to give Thor his roses for the Sweet Rabbit line. That's how I refer to Molly the Wonder Dog now, but I can't shortchange the God of Thunder's arrival into Wakanda just in the nick of time in Infinity War. As always, Led Zeppelin is your soundtrack. Pretty helpful. Cap also has his share of comedic highlights, referring to his own posterior in the most, patriotic way imaginable in Endgame.
That is America's ass.
But why do we show up to the movies? To watch biceps stymie helicopters. Civil War took the cake until Cap took Mjolnir for those famous fighting words in Avengers Endgame. This thing really isn't that heavy. I could actually do this all day. Whoop. Dropped it.
You're all not worthy.
Enhanced, of course, by the moment in Age of Ultron when even Thor noticed just how much time Cap's been putting in the gym. But then we find ourselves returning back to Tony. His endgame moments feature plenty of comedy and familial tones, but his snap with the Infinity Gauntlet and once more saying exactly who he is the icing on the best cake any British Bake Off fan could hope for.
And I am Iron Man.
He went out the same way he came in, with a gigantic explosion that would alter the course of comic book films forevermore. And for those efforts, and all the guffaws in between, Stark wins the point and goes back up 2-1 to nothing. Round 4, magazine subscriptions. And now that head-scratching round title gets some clarity. Mark, why not one magazine or one magazine subscription? Well, because between these three heroes, they have a lot of issues. Family, friends, significant others. Thor, Iron Man, and Cap have a ton of emotional weight to negotiate through their runs. This round will be won by whoever has the most to deal with and who's taken the most steps to improve the mental health of themselves and their inner circle. Captain America seems like the all-United States boy of a bygone era, and indeed at one time he was. But even then, he had to manage his dreams against the very limiting means his body would allow. Once the super serum process was complete, he still had a maniacal compulsion to serve his country, only to be shelved as a USO traveling sideshow instead of actually jumping into the fire. Then his life is further complicated by falling for a gal named Peggy, a badass in her own right, only to find himself thawed out in another time when Peg is, still alive. That's the good news, but yeah, she makes Ma from Golden Girls look like a spring chicken.
Yes, I think it works.
Meanwhile, at Stark's place, he has everything one could possibly want in a supportive partner, but he was too busy playboying around town and building bombs to notice those fun goop candles in his office. Even after he sorts out who he actually should be in a faraway cave, Tony still can't fully commit to Pepper until it's almost too late. But long before Miss Potts entered the picture, Tony's parents had a premature exit. Stark's last words with his folks weren't the ideal phrases given the tragedy that was about to ensue, and even with all the iron in the world, the man inside the suit was still haunted by how they left things. If it's daddy issues you want, how about we toss in some mommy ones and a sibling rivalry at no extra charge? That's what Thor is dealing with throughout his own trilogy, and it makes for a gruff exterior that no one not named Jane Foster can truly crack.
Sorry.
Now, imagine having all of that and then putting the pressure of representing an entire planet while trying to save its people on your shoulders. If Tony and Thor were tied with parent troubles, Loki, as the ultimate trickster, serves as a constant thorn in the side of his bro. Oh, and then their sister returns to bring the freaking apocalypse to their home planet. How do you get through all this in one session with your therapist?
My father is dead, as are the princes. You're welcome.
And yeah, Tony Stark had to step up and completely change the course of his billion-dollar company, but Thor's enterprise was Asgard itself, and he also lost an eye. I had to say it. Of the three, Cap seems to have wrapped things up in the most fairy tale fashion. He helped save the known universe, then returned to his homeworld in the time that he was most fond of, back in the day with his steady girl Peggy. By the time he ages into the modern world this time, the only fight he's getting in is for the last piece of prime rib at Hometown Buffet.
No, I'd like a Bloody Mary.
In a round that comes down to Tony and Thor, I give Stark points for stepping up when we needed him the most. The ultimate selfish dude had matured into a man who could make the ultimate sacrifice for the greater good, but even when he was a guy supposedly at peace with his Pepper and their daughter in a remote cabin, there was still an air of unfinished business. He was able to at least rise above his own daddy issues to be a great papa who loves his girl Infinity and was the perfect mentor for Peter Parker. But Thor has had more of a mountain to climb than anyone. Both him and Stark were born into privilege, but throughout his life, it feels like Thor never had it easy. Brother, sister, mom, dad, Asgard as a whole, his eyeball.
So dead brother, huh? Yeah, it could be annoying.
Just because Thor still has some soul searching to do doesn't mean that he loses points. Rather, we should all applaud him for sticking around when a heroic sacrifice or a relationship at a time would have been the easier way out. The dude is still looking out for us. And by the way, Tony, when Thor found his romantic match, he made his feelings clearer than you did way early. Thor takes the issues round, even though his magazine has yet to be completed. Everyone's on the board now, but it's still Iron Man 2, God of Thunder, and Cap, one apiece.
Is that the best you can do?
And now it's time for the wild card round. Snap, crackle, pop. As much as I'd love to see these three mighty heroes take on the culinary experts at Rice Krispies, ooh, do I smell another Versus episode next season? We could do a whole cereal mascot bracket. I got Tony the Tiger.
I like it.
This particular crackle and pop refer to the many baddies that Iron Man, Captain Crunch, America, and Thor have had to battle, and the snap, well, you'll get extra points for how you handled that matchup with Thanos. Kicking things off with Tony Stark, who we met in a simpler time in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. There was no known multiverse, and we didn't have strange doctors caping around town, just a couple corporate magnates arguing with their robot machines as to how a company should be run. Obadiah Stane was a good warm-up for Whiplash and Justin Hammer, and they were good practice for Mandarin, who was actually, there was a lot of competition. Aldrich Killian was there. That's my final answer.
I am the Mandarin!
Thor had to deal with his own nefarious adopted brother Loki multiple times. Oh, and he also had to tussle with a frost giant and a destroyer, and that's all in one movie. Then he took on a dark elf, which is much scarier than it sounds, and a delicious brewski around Christmas time. But the creme de la creme as far as imposing opposition was of course Hela, whose antlers resembled the top of the food chain, hell-bent on chopping everything and anything on Asgard. He also fought Hulk a few times, which is really the best training camp there is. But if it's fights among brothers preparing for a long winter, we're not talking about the NFL preseason. Rather, it's the love lost between Bucky and Steve, Winter Soldier, and Captain America. Cap wanted nothing more than to keep his war buddy by his side, but those nefarious evildoers loved their tricky word combinations. Say the random phrase in the right order, and all the wrong stuff happens. So much so that Cap's primary foe in Winter Soldier became Tony's biggest adversary along with Cap in Civil War. If you're keeping score at home, so far Thor has the upper hand, so now we look to that almighty paw of Thanos. The biggest baddie the Avengers ever had to tango with, took a multitude of films and a frickin' time machine to be felled. But Thor had a clear shot at him in that gauntleted hand, however he went for the chest. It's a fair mistake in the moment, we all probably would have done it, but you gotta cut the head off a snake or at least the hand with the Infinity Gauntlet on it. Come on, Thor, you gotta know time and situation. Captain America did surprise Thanos when he grabbed onto that hand in Infinity War, and the purple gem god did look impressed, either with Cap's strength, sheer guts, or both. But it was Tony Stark who earned verbal praise from Thanos at the end of Infinity War, which is good sportsmanship, and 'twas Iron Man who ultimately did the snap that ended Grimace's reign of terror for good. It was heroic, necessary, and a fitting end to Tony Stark's service as one of the leaders of the Avengers. And for that, and so much more along the way, Tony Stark gets the point and thus wins the match 3-1-1. Ooh, I know, it was so tough voting against Cap and Thor, but come on, Iron Man is the first one we fell in love with for a reason. And by the way, if you like Iron Man on Versus, he took on Batman last season. It was a good one. Well, that's all the time we have today, and keep in mind, this is all just my opinion. Now let's hear from you. Hit me up on social media at Mark Ellis Live, and keep it right here at Rotten Tomatoes for all the latest in the world of movies, TV, entertainment, and so much more. Thanks for watching Versus. My name is Mark Ellis, and I will now go home to pet my sweet rabbit, which is what I call her. Hi, Molly.